Okay, so have you ever stumbled across a book and it feels so disarmingly personal? Like it's unlocking these parts of yourself you didn't even know were there. That's the sensation I'm getting from Sermons for the Youth too by ENON Jacobs.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical polished, mass market spiritual guide.
Right.
This book is raw, it's vulnerable, and it's bursting with this unique blend of sermons and poems and journal entries that feels so incredibly intimate.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're getting this window into someone's raw spiritual journey. And Jacobs, he doesn't shy away from diving headfirst into some pretty intense reflections on ego.
Right.
He doesn't just call it destructive. He breaks down exactly how this thing we call ego can actually poison our relationships.
Yeah, it's fascinating. He argues that ego makes us crave this validation from others.
Right.
Which then prevents us from actually being able to offer the selfless love that he connects to, true connection. It's ego traps us in this cycle of seeking approval instead of just giving love freely.
It's like he's saying real love isn't about keeping score. It's about giving without this expectation of getting anything in return.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of selfless love seems so deeply tied to his faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He draws this powerful parallel between this pure selfless love and the love that he attributes to God.
Right.
And it kind of suggests that by quieting our egos and embracing this more selfless approach, we're kind of opening ourselves up to a deeper connection with the divine.
Which makes his whole perspective on growth even more intriguing. Instead of focusing on external achievements, Jacobs uses this powerful analogy of two warriors to illustrate his point.
Yeah, and this is where we really start to understand what he means by growth being a journey and not this destination.
Right.
One warrior is so obsessed with racking up all these wins, think slaying dragons and amassing all the treasure. But he's still internally wrestling with all this turmoil.
Yeah, it's like he's achieved all the outward markers of success, but hasn't actually confronted the real battleground, the one that's happening within.
Exactly. It's a powerful metaphor for how we often prioritize external validation over genuine internal work.
Totally.
And Jacobs challenges us to be that second warrior, the one who confronts their inner demons and embraces that often messy process of self-reflection.
And he does not sugarcoat the difficulty of this process.
No, he doesn't.
In the excerpts from 9.4.22, Jacobs uses this striking phrase. He talks about stretching the deformed areas of our lives.
Oh, wow.
It feels very visceral, very raw. What do you make of that phrase?
I think it speaks to the necessity of us having to lean into discomfort, of embracing challenges that force us to grow. It's about recognizing that true transformation often requires us to confront those parts of ourselves that we would much rather avoid.
It's like he's saying real growth happens outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
It's not always pretty, but it's in those moments of stretching and discomfort that we discover our true strength and resilience.
And he suggests that God can use those tough experiences to kind of mold us into something much stronger, more resilient.
Okay, let's unpack that a little further.
Okay.
It's one thing to talk about stretching and embracing discomfort.
Right.
But how does Jacobs actually see those difficult experiences shaping us? What are we supposed to do with the pain and the challenges?
That's where his concept of savoring comes in.
Okay.
And he doesn't mean enjoying the pain itself, but he's emphasizing the importance of really leaning into those difficult experiences and almost mining them for the lessons that they hold.
Okay.
And he seems to be suggesting that if we don't, we're basically doomed to repeat the same mistakes.
It's like that saying, the lesson keeps repeating until you learn it or something.
Right, yeah.
It's like he's saying we can either resist the discomfort or we can lean in and try to understand what it's trying to teach us.
It's a powerful call to mindful reflection.
Yeah.
Because as Jacobs points out, unprocessed pain and trauma can keep us stuck in these unhealthy patterns.
Right.
And he seems to see this mindful reflection as a path to break free from those cycles.
It makes you wonder, what are some of the specific things that he's actually telling us to savor, even if they feel kind of unpleasant at first?
Well, he gets surprisingly specific in his reflections on relationships.
Okay.
Particularly in the section on worldly distractions.
Oh, yeah. That part really struck a chord with me. It's like he's issuing this warning about aligning ourselves with people who don't necessarily share our values, especially in the context of physical intimacy.
Yeah. He seems to suggest that sleeping with someone who isn't aligned with your spiritual path can actually diminish your inner light
Whoa.
so to speak.
I mean, it's a pretty bold statement, and it might not resonate with everyone listening.
Right.
But I can see how he's connecting it back to these themes of self-worth and discernment. And really, like, being mindful of who we're allowing into our energetic space.
Right. It's not necessarily about imposing this, like, rigid set of rules.
Yeah.
But more about encouraging readers to ask themselves some tough questions. You know, like, am I seeking validation from this relationship?
Right.
Is this person actually adding to my life force, or are they depleting it?
And this idea of being discerning about the energy that we're allowing into our lives, it's not just limited to romantic relationships, right? He seems to be speaking more broadly about, like, the things we consume, the environments we're in.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Jacob seems to be advocating for this, like, holistic approach to spiritual growth. One that really, like, encompasses all areas of our lives.
Right.
It's about being conscious of what we're seeding, our minds, our bodies, our souls.
And in a world that's constantly vying for our attention, that feels more important than ever.
Especially because when we're so bombarded with so much, like, external noise, it's easy to lose touch with that inner voice, you know, the one that's guiding us toward our authentic path.
Right.
And that's what makes his reflections on creativity so fascinating.
You mean the part about God loving his handwriting?
Yes.
That section totally stopped me in my tracks. I mean, it's such a simple, unexpected observation, but it speaks volumes about his relationship with spirituality.
Right. He's not just talking about these grandiose spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
He finds the divine in the everyday, in the act of, like, putting pen to paper.
And it makes me wonder, like, what is it about handwriting, about that physical act of creation that feels so significant?
Perhaps it's the way that it connects us to something deeper than ourselves. You know, something beyond the digital realm. There's a vulnerability and intimacy in the way that our thoughts and emotions kind of, like, flow onto the page.
It's like he's saying our creativity is like a form of prayer, a way of, like, communing with the divine.
Precisely. And that perspective really highlights the transformative power of art, of self-expression in all its forms. It's this reminder that spirituality isn't confined to, like, sacred spaces or rituals. You know, it's something that we can tap into through our passions, through the things that set our souls on fire.
And for Jacobs, it seems like writing is one of those things that really lights him up. We see these glimpses of it throughout the book, his love for language, his willingness to be vulnerable, to put his whole heart on the page.
And that rawness, that vulnerability, it's what makes Sermons for the Youth, too, so compelling.
Right.
It's not about presenting this, like, polished facade of spiritual perfection. It's about embracing the messiness, the contradictions, the constant evolution that defines a genuine spiritual journey.
And that's a really refreshing message, especially in a world that often feels obsessed with, like, quick fixes and instant gratification. It's really a good point. It's like this reminder that, you know, real transformation, like real spiritual growth, it's this ongoing process, you know?
Yeah, it's about, like, showing up every day, doing the work.
Right.
Even when it's uncomfortable, even when we stumble, you know?
Exactly. And being okay with not having all the answers right.
Right.
Because Jacobs definitely doesn't present himself as having it all figured out.
No, not at all.
He's wrestling with these big questions right there. Like alongside us.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes this book such a powerful conversation starter.
Totally.
It's not trying to, like, hand you this prepackaged set of beliefs. You know?
Right.
It's more about, like, inviting you to explore your own relationship with spirituality, with growth, with what it means to live a more intentional life for yourself.
Yeah. It's like he's saying, here's my journey so far. Like, what's yours going to look like? Exactly. For me, that's, like, a really inspiring message.
It is.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off of needing to have all the answers.
Right.
And instead, it encourages a sense of curiosity, of exploration, of just being open to wherever this path might lead us. You know?
And speaking of paths, there's this one line at the end of the book that I keep coming back to.
Okay.
Just says, see the world.
Oh, wow.
It's so simple, but, like, so profound. What do you think he means by that?
You know, I think it speaks to the transformative power of experiencing, like, different cultures, different perspectives, different ways of seeing the world. It's about stepping outside of our comfort zones and allowing ourselves to be challenged, to be changed by, you know, what we encounter out there.
It's like he's saying travel can be like its own form of spiritual practice almost.
Exactly. It's about expanding our understanding of ourselves and the world around us,
Right.
And that expansion, that broadening of our horizons, it can be so enriching both personally and spiritually.
It really makes you kind of stop and think like, what are those experiences, those encounters, those journeys that have like really shaped our own spiritual paths? And how can we continue to seek out those experiences that challenge us to like grow and evolve and see the world with these fresh eyes?
That's the beauty of a book like this, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't tie everything up all neatly in a bow,
Yeah.
It leaves us with like more questions than answers.
Totally.
But I think in doing so, it sparks this, something within us, a desire to keep seeking, to keep exploring, to, keep deepening our own understanding of what it really means to live this like truly meaningful life.
Yeah. It's such a good point. I think that's a beautiful place to leave it.
Nandemoii-SAMA